There's a new pandemic, and it's coming for your penis. Men across the globe are reporting banished boners. It might sound like a joke, but it is disturbingly real. The stories are shocking, but what is really happening here? Can your dong actually vanish, or is something else going on? On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're getting to the bottom of the disappearing genitals. This bizarre outbreak isn't new. For centuries, men across Africa, Asia, and even Europe have fallen victim to sudden waves of genital panic, believing their junk is shrinking, stolen, or vanishing altogether. Entire communities have been swept up in fear, sparking riots, witch hunts, and even executions. The phenomenon is known as penis panic, or Koro. Before we get to the science, psychology, and the history of the world's weirdest kind of mass hysteria, let's take a look at a real case where this panic turned deadly. In 2013, in Tirangolu, a war-torn village in the Central African Republic, a stranger walked into the market to buy some tea. By sundown, he was being dragged, broken, and bloodied into the village square by a gang of armed men. The charge was sorcery. But not just any sorcery. He was accused of magically stealing the villagers' penises. His desperate pleas for mercy went unheard. The villagers believed the spell would not be lifted until the sorcerer was dead, and so before any more boners were banished, the man was executed. Tirangolu had already endured years of bloodshed during the Central African Republic Bush War, and in 2013 the country was 1 year into another brutal civil war. Tensions were high, fear was everywhere, and outsiders were treated with suspicion from the moment they arrived. In that environment, it didn't take much for hysteria to turn lethal. But this pattern isn't unique. During the English Civil War, in the 1600s, witch trials exploded as people fell back on their darkest superstitions. And in Tirangolu, the same dynamic played out. One witness told journalist Louisa Lombard what happened next. After the stranger handed over his money, he collapsed the vendor's hand. The tea seller felt an electric tingling course through his body and immediately sensed that his penis had shrunk. His yells quickly drew a crowd. Somehow, in the fray, a second man fell victim as well. At that moment, the stranger's fate was sealed. Because how do you prove you're not a dark magic penis thief to a crowd of panicked villagers? Or an armed rebel militia trying to keep the peace? But like we said, this isn't some freak accident or one-off. It's the result of years of deeply ingrained superstitions and cultural beliefs. And that is before we even get into the more psychological side of things. While penis panic is most common in Asia and Africa these days, it actually started in Europe in the 14th and 15th centuries. Every penis panic in the last few hundred years can be blamed on a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, written by self-proclaimed witch hunter Heinrich Kramer. The book and its contents are complete nonsense that have gotten a lot of people killed, but it captured the fears men had about women 600 years ago, including the ultimate horror, up to and including being cucked by the devil. We are not kidding. Medieval witch hunters believed that witches were banging Satan. Even the image of a witch's broom was based off the idea of riding the devil's, trident. But that wasn't even the craziest penis lore in the Malleus Maleficarum. According to the book, witches could steal men's junk with spells. They would turn the pilfered penises into living pets to help with dark magic, sometimes even feeding them oats. Guess it beats having a wiener dog. Beliefs that the other are stealing our flesh, blood, or body parts is as old as the hills. The anti-Semitic trope of blood libel was also rife in the Middle Ages around the same time that the first wave of penis panic was starting off. This was the belief that Jewish people used human blood in their rituals, which they stole from good Christians. Obviously, that's completely false, but it made for a great pretense to persecute Jewish people at the time, just as penis panic made a great excuse to go after women you didn't like. You see the same thing in colonial tropes, where indigenous people were written off as cannibals or human sacrifice cults. It was an easy excuse to invade and civilize the area, or, just kill a whole bunch of people and steal all their natural resources. And these beliefs about penis stealing haven't even changed that much. They're just more personalized to the specific areas where the ideas have sprung up. Let's head back to rural Central Africa, where many believed the genital thefts weren't random at all. Instead, it was the work of wealthy black magic practicing urbanites in the cities of Nigeria and Cameroon, where people have multi-story houses. One local said, quote, "You see how advanced Cameroon is? It's because they are so strong in commerce of all kinds, including in genitals and scalps," which is quite the accusation to make. But much like those medieval witches feeding their pet trouser snakes handfuls of oats, it's something that a lot of people believe. The local superstition is that the penises are used in black magic rituals for a huge number of different results. And while the trade is based in Nigeria and Cameroon, one of the actual biggest markets for magically stolen penises is in Europe, home of the Malleus Maleficarum itself. One local rumor goes that a witch was intercepted at an airport trying to smuggle several penises out of the country on a plane by hiding them inside a baguette. Again, this is obviously not true for so many reasons. Seriously, have you ever seen someone take an entire baguette through airport security before? Maybe only in Charles de Gaulle. For some in rural Africa, this belief in the penis trade is a part of a larger selection of conspiratorial beliefs that anthropologists call the occult economy. For many in small African villages, the benefits of global capitalism aren't exactly obvious, so the wider wheels of international markets can feel less like economics and more like straight-up magic. The belief that organ trafficking, magical or otherwise, is a pillar of global wealth helps explain why so many see the gap between the haves and the have-nots as so massive. Why might people in Africa believe the international flesh trade is behind global wealth? What possible historical event could have planted that idea? Slavery. It was slavery, in case that wasn't obvious. But 2 people succumbing to penile hysteria in a small village in 2013 is nothing compared to what many people believe is the absolute worst case of Koro in modern history, the 1967 Great Singapore Penis Panic. It sounds pretty funny on paper, but it was actually extremely stressful for all involved. It all started when a 16-year-old boy ran into the Singapore General Hospital looking pale and afraid while clutching his ding-dong. No, he wasn't just some deranged public masturbator. He was a boy gripped with mortal terror. If he let go of his penis, it would retract back into his abdomen and kill him. But here's the interesting thing. He didn't think that he was cursed or under the dark spell of a greedy willy witch. His panic had started when he had heard a rumor at school about tainted pork causing Koro, or genital retraction syndrome. There had been an outbreak of swine fever at the time, so all the pigs had been vaccinated against it. This caused fear and mistrust around the general public, and that is how the Koro chaos began. Koro, by the way, is borrowed from a Malay word meaning the head of a turtle. Sufferers believe their penis was shrinking back into their body just like a turtle pulling into its shell. This boy, for the sake of his dignity, has thankfully been left nameless and had eaten a pork bun the morning before he had heard the rumor. Then, when he went to take a pee, he felt that his penis was shrinking and he started to panic. Must have been the tainted pork. Clutching his penis, he ran to his parents begging to get to a hospital fast. When he was there, the doctor gave him some chlordiazepoxide, an anxiety relief medication often given to people experiencing alcohol withdrawals, and his condition was eased. But the real chaos was just about to start. Soon hospitals were flooded with men in full-blown panic, convinced their schlongs were shrinking and they were about to die. The hysteria raged for 7 days straight. Pork sales collapsed and nearly 500 people fell victim to the madness. And those are just the reported numbers from people going to official government hospitals. People seeking out traditional Chinese medicine to soothe their penis panic wouldn't have been included in that tally, making the actual toll of Koro victims higher. The situation got so severe that the Ministry of Primary Production had to make an official statement saying that neither the pork nor the vaccine would cause any harm to human beings. The Singapore Medical Association and the Ministry of Health needed to take over the TV and radio waves to spread the news that the disease was purely psychological. As the message spread, Singapore's trust in its doctors and the fact that it was a modern urban city, not an isolated village, meant no one was executed. Within a month, the Koro cases had completely disappeared. However, plenty of people affected still had some pretty gnarly real injuries to deal with afterward. Terrified that their penis might slip back into their body and kill them, people tried anything to stop it. Strapping on rubber bands, chopsticks, clamps, even clothes pegs. Interestingly, the theory about these ideas taking root during periods of war or huge cultural displacements still holds true. About 98% of recorded cases were among the people of Chinese descent. Some experts argue that the stress fueling the hysteria may have been linked to China's Cultural Revolution, which was taking place at the time. Worry your country is tearing itself apart? You're gonna start worrying about your penis too, apparently. Speaking of China, the next major penis panic actually happened there, 17 years after that incident in Singapore. The Chinese version occurred between 1984 to 1985, and over 3,000 people were affected by penis panic this time. Much like in Singapore, the people who believed they were affected obsessively pulled on their plonkers, and they sought help through Chinese herbal medicine. But here's the scary thing that was discovered during the Chinese outbreak. You don't even need a penis to suffer from Koro. Around 16% of the sufferers reported this time were women, fearing that their boobs, their nipples, vulva, or labia were shrinking away. And there were even reports of Koro by proxy, where people believed the genitals of their children were vanishing. Much like in Terengganu, this panic tapped into deep cultural fears. In China, Koro, known as Suyang, was described in medical texts over 2,000 years old. Spiritual solutions were considered, like using exorcism techniques to banish whatever evil forces were behind the phenomenon. But as the 80s came to a coke-fueled end and the blissfully ignorant 90s began, cases of penis panic started popping up all over Africa again. And the story was the same. Penis poachers were swiping members to sell to the underground dong market. It's easy to laugh at all this, but that unfortunate tea lover in our first story is far from the only man to get killed by a penis panic lynch mob. In fact, between 1997 and 2003, at least 36 people were murdered after it was claimed that they were a Wang warlock. Sudan at least bucked the trend for creative explanations after a case of apparent penis shrinkage in the capital city of Khartoum. A man claimed that after being given a comb by a stranger, he used it and immediately felt his penis shrink. We've all been there, right, fellas? This was connected to a spate of claims of foreigners appearing around town, shaking people's hands and making their penis disappear. It resulted in almost 50 people getting arrested for sorcery and another 40 for inciting public panic. But the comb case took a bizarre turn when the Sudanese columnist Jafar Abbas claimed it wasn't magic at all. It was a high-tech, penis-destroying device built and deployed by Jewish foreigners in the city, in his very own colorful words. No doubt this comb was a laser-controlled surgical robot that penetrates the skull, passes to the lower body, and emasculates a man. And if shading this imaginary Jewish super spy wasn't enough, Abbas also roasted the poor guy who blamed the comb, writing, "You jackass, how can you put a comb from a man you don't know to your head?" While even relatives avoid using the same comb. We won't say he's necessarily wrong there, but it is pretty brutal to add insult to psychosomatic injury like that, Abbas. Still, all of this penis-related insanity might have you asking a very reasonable question: how did any of this happen? To answer that, we need to talk about memes. No, not image macros and silly social media jokes. We're talking about the DNA of the soul here, because you don't get the penis panic or any other kind of terrifying mass hysteria without the raw power of memes working behind them. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, controversial ethologist Richard Dawkins had an interesting question to answer. If our physical traits spread across the long, twisted lines of evolution through genes, how did our most sticky ideas spread? Memes were his answer. The genes of human culture, which could differ vastly from place to place, group to group. Religious belief, regardless of denomination, can be seen as a meme, as can urban legends like the killer in the back seat or the man with the hook hand bothering couples on Lover's Lane. And like genes, memes are subject to random mutations too. Take that urban legend of the killer in the back seat. In some stories, he's got an axe, in others a knife or a hammer or a length of piano wire to strangle the unfortunate driver. In some versions, the person might be saved by a good Samaritan in the car behind him, flashing their high beams every time the killer sat up behind the driver. Or maybe it was a quick-witted gas station attendant spotting movement through the windows. People embellish stories and ideas all the time, whether it's to exaggerate the intended effect or to moderate it to better suit the audience. It's why word of mouth is still the most valuable source of advertising. Say you're in the market for a new PC, or you don't know which furniture store to shop at. Whose opinion are you going to trust more? The commercials designed to separate you from your hard-earned cash, or the genuine recommendation of a friend whose opinion you trust and respect? Memes aren't always a bad thing either. Knock-knock jokes are memes. The idea of washing your hands after you go to the bathroom is a meme. But when the idea is not only false but potentially dangerous, like penis panic, you start to see the dark side of memes. They work like a virus, just as a pathogen hides in your cells and multiplies. A dangerous meme can take root in your mind and spread from person to person until an entire community is infected. That's why, when an idea, a video, an image, or a trend explodes over the internet, we call it going viral. And just like biological viruses, nowhere is more vulnerable than a tight-knit insular group that has little input from the wider world. It's for this very reason that cults purposefully try to isolate themselves, because the most dangerous ideas are like mushrooms. They have an easier time growing in the dark. The key thing to remember is that a case of mass hysteria like penis panic spreads from person to person like a social disease. It's built on years of ingrained cultural beliefs and fears, and given that nobody's most rational brain is in control when they're in a blind panic, it's incredibly hard to talk people out of these ideas once they have taken hold, especially if it's already infected a whole group. There's nothing like a gang of terrified, like-minded individuals to reinforce their own and each other's beliefs. But how an idea like this spreads is only one half of the whole equation here. The other big question is how an individual can come to believe that their dong is being disappeared while it simply objectively isn't. Surely, there's gotta be some biological root for this condition, right? Well, actually, no. It's pretty much all psychological and cultural. Just things get extremely personal when genitals are involved and panic makes us increasingly irrational. The cultural mechanism for what starts a penis panic will differ, but the feeling of your penis shrinking or retracting back into your body is truly all in your head. It's a shared group-fueled delusion, and it hits the hardest if you already feel sexually threatened, inadequate, or you feel shame about your masturbation habits. Thankfully for most people, the problem can be solved, but the way of solving it will differ depending how and why the person believed they caught it. In Singapore, it was enough to hear from trusted medical authorities the whole thing was a hysteria. In some of the Chinese cases, their belief in the effectiveness of Chinese traditional medicine canceled out the belief that it was happening in the first place. In modern cases, whether in Africa or the rare ones in Europe, the treatment is usually simple: talk therapy and reassurance that nothing is wrong. That alone can help people regain control over the intrusive moments of penis anxiety. Whether it's blamed on black magic businessmen, tainted pork, evil spirits, or even high-tech combs, one thing is certain: Koro is really just mass hysteria, and penis panic will always be waiting, ready to strike whenever times get tough. Believe it or not, genitals mysteriously vanishing isn't the strangest story out there. Check out weirdest sex customs around the world to see how people get freaky, or click on this video instead.